What if I told you they were soldiers in World War II so feared, so notorious for savagery, that even their own enemies refused to take them prisoner, not because they couldn't be captured, but because capturing them felt like holding a live grenade. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were the SS, and what happened to them when the war turned is one of history's most chilling untold stories. Imagine being a soldier on the front lines of World War II and realizing that the enemy in front of you is just fighting for their country. They're fighting for something far darker, something fanatical, something that made even seasoned Allied commanders whisper, "Do not let them surrender." Who were these men that inspired such dread? They were the SS, the Schutzstaffel, and their story begins not on a battlefield, but in the shadows of a rising dictatorship. What started as a small personal bodyguard unit for Adolf Hitler quietly transformed into one of the most feared and ruthless organizations in human history. Under the iron command of Heinrich Himmler, a man obsessed with power and racial ideology, the SS grew from a handful of loyalists into a sprawling empire of terror. They weren't just soldiers, they were enforcers, executioners, and ideological warriors handpicked and molded to serve one master, the Nazi Reich. And then came the Waffen-SS, their combat arm. These weren't ordinary troops marching into battle. These were men who had been stripped of doubt, stripped of mercy, and filled with a terrifying purpose. They were equipped with the finest weapons, rapid-fire MG-40 machine guns, King Tiger tanks, and trained to fight with a ferocity that chilled even veteran soldiers. But what truly set them apart wasn't their weapons, it was their mind, because somewhere, deep in the machinery of the SS, something monstrous had been engineered. And the world was about to find out exactly what that meant. By the time Allied boots hit the beaches of Normandy in 1944, the whispers had already spread through every trench, every foxhole, every command post. SS prisoners were not to be taken lightly. Some said they weren't to be taken at all. But why? What had these men done to earn such a terrifying reputation? The answer was written in blood across villages, forests, and frozen fields stretching from France to the Soviet Union. SS divisions didn't just fight wars. They committed them. Massacres of civilians, mass executions of partisan fighters, wholesale slaughter of communities deemed undesirable under Nazi ideology. The Totenkopf and Das Reich divisions became synonymous with unspeakable acts rolling into towns and leaving nothing but silence and smoke behind. And then came the Malmedy massacre, December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge, 84. American prisoners of war captured soldiers, unarmed, hands raised, were lined up in a snow-covered field and shot in cold blood by SS troops. Their bodies left in the frost as a grim message to anyone who dared resist. That message was received, and it ignited a fury in Allied soldiers that no military directive could contain. By the time stories of SS brutality filtered back through the ranks, the concentration camps, the killing squads, the executions of British and Canadian commandos, an unspoken rule had formed. If you saw those twin lightning bolt runes on a collar, if you knew you were dealing with one of them, the Geneva Convention felt very far away, and vengeance felt very close. They thought their markings made them elite. In the end, those same markings made them targets. Every SS soldier carried something that set them apart, something impossible to hide when the tide of war turned against them. Beneath the left arm, etched into skin, was a blood-type tattoo. A tiny inscription, a B, OV, or O, meant to ensure battlefield medical care. It was a practical measure. It became a death sentence. Because when Allied and Soviet soldiers caught a prisoner, the first thing they checked was that arm. No tattoo. Regular Wehrmacht. Tattoo present. SS, and for many liberating troops, that discovery ended the conversation entirely. Their uniforms told the same story. The SS collar runes to jagged lightning bolts were unmistakable. Desperate soldiers in the war's final weeks tried to burn off their tattoos with cigarettes, scrape them with blades, anything to erase the evidence of what they had been. Most failed, most were recognized anyway, and on the Eastern Front, the situation was even more brutal. Soviet soldiers, having witnessed the systematic annihilation of entire communities, didn't see SS captives as prisoners of war. They saw them as butchers who had torched their villages, murdered their political officers, and carried out orders designed to exterminate them. Official Allied policy still demanded Geneva Convention treatment for all prisoners. But in the chaos of liberation and the horror of Dachau, where American soldiers discovered rail cars packed with thousands of skeletal corpses, policy and reality became two very different things. Raged doesn't read rulebooks, and the SS had authored too many pages of horror for the world to simply look away. By 1945, Germany was crumbling. Cities were rubble, armies were ghosts of their former strength, and the men of the SS, the fanatical, ideologically conditioned warriors who had sworn to fight to the last breath, found themselves facing exactly that. Their own indoctrination had become a trap. Trained to believe that Soviet capture meant torture and death, SS soldiers fought with suicidal desperation, refusing surrender even when completely encircled, even when wounded, even when there was nothing left to fight for. Every last stand made them more dangerous, and every act of deception, every fake surrender followed by a hidden weapon, made Allied troops less willing to take the risk of showing mercy. Commanders on both sides quietly looked the other way. The crimes were too well known, the anger too deep. In the chaotic final weeks, even German civilians, ordinary people who had suffered through years of brutal war, turned on SS stragglers found hiding in streets and cellars. Fellow Wehrmacht soldiers, bitter that SS fanaticism had prolonged the war's agony, sometimes handed them over, or worse. Liberation of the death camps delivered the final, undeniable verdict on the SS legacy. At Dachau, at Bergen-Belsen, at camp after camp, the evidence was everywhere, and it was overwhelming. Most SS men who survived the war faced justice, whether through military tribunals or the hands of those they had wronged. A small number slipped away, buried their pasts in false identities and distant countries. But for the vast majority, those twin lightning bolts had written their fate in the very first act of terror they committed. History simply waited for the bill to come due, and it always does. The story of the SS is not just a chapter in military history. It is a warning about what happens when fanaticism is weaponized, when ideology is used to extinguish humanity, and when ordinary men are transformed into instruments of terror. They rose as an elite, they fell as war criminals. And in the end, their own markings, the symbols they wore with such pride, became the signatures of their downfall. Thanks for watching Untold World War II. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe, because history's darkest chapters still have lessons that echo today. Drop a comment below. Which moment in this story shocked you most? We read everyone.